So this is kind of our mantra, a park for peace and quiet, a park for the people, and a park for the planet. And we'll talk about why we say that. And in the bottom right corner is Warren's logo he made for us. Preserve this park. Okay, so most of you, but maybe not all of you, know that this parkland sits in the eastern end of Clallam, just across from Jefferson County. And today it is a day use park with 35 miles of trails used by equestrians, hikers, and bikers. So there are hundreds of outspoken supporters that want to keep this park a day use park in its pristine shape. Is a coalition of different organizations here, which includes Friends of Miller Peninsula State Park, Save Miller Park Coalition, with hundreds of other supporters, Sierra Club, Protect Peninsula's Future, and many more. Parks, though, has other plans, which we will be privy to sometime this year. And this is why we want to start talking to the public now and informing the public with some issues and facts that we don't think parks will address. And I want to say that you are the first to see our recently completed PowerPoint, so you can point out any likes and dislikes when we get to the end of the presentation, and we'll open it for Q&A. Slide 3, please, Peter. And I've got to coordinate this. So a quick recap on how this park came to be. It starts in 1985 and goes through 1994, but it's come back today, and it is a very current issue. So the history, some background on this land. From the time of the settlers, which this land was set aside, Diamond Point was set aside as a quarantine station in 1893 and lasted till I think it was 1933. It was a self-supporting village. Ships brought in immigrants from other countries, and they were deloused in a little delousing house that's still standing today. It had a hospital, a surgeon's home, housing for other employees, and everything came in ships. There were no roads then into the area. And they were pretty much self-sufficient. They grew their food. They took care of themselves, and any other items that needed to be brought in were brought in by ship. After the federal government sold it off, it was purchased by various developers. It changed hands several times until around the 1950s, when some of the structures, some of those houses, were sold as residences, and the rest of the land around there was plotted for home sites. And it was very typical for Seattleites to purchase land for their retirement here. In 1973, the area was threatened with a twin nuclear power plant and an oil port on Discovery Bay in Diamond Point. And in 1975, that was squelched. But in 1980, the Department of Natural Resources, who owned most of that land, and it wasn't of use to them, they kept wanting to sell it off. They tried to sell off 700 acres for an off-road vehicle park, which was the residents did not want because of the noise, and that issue went away. And then in 1985, when the Clallam County was working on its growth management plan, it put together an advisory group. What should we do with Miller Peninsula? And the advisory group came back and said, let's set aside 1,444 acres for a day use park. Somewhere along the line, they interested state parks in making it a state park. That same year, 1985, Booth Gardner was elected as governor. 1988, Parks and DNR, State Department of Natural Resource and State Parks, after getting a direction from the state legislators to look for more land suitable for state parks. More people were moving in, more people were vacationing here. The two agencies looked at 1,000 sites around Washington state and narrowed it down to 22 pieces of property. And one of those pieces was on the Miller Peninsula. And it ranked 8th in priority to be turned into a state park. Again, these were lands that were not valuable anymore for DNR to make money off the forest. And so they were wonderful lands for state parks. The reason I brought up Governor Gardner is because of this. In 1988, when the state legislature was very interested in these 22 parcels and deemed them all as parklands that they were going to fund, Governor Gardner secretly was dealing with Mitsubishi in Japan for some of this land because Mitsubishi wanted to develop in the United States a private villa and golf course for Japanese golfers to come over and have a very beautiful vacation and a beautiful water view. Over time, they were talked out of that villa golf course and into something much larger, which was called a proposed recreational residential development, which was going to be over 1,000 acres. And as time went on, they kept wanting more and more of the parkland. And DNR and state parks was saying, sure, take more of it. So basically we were reduced, the land was reduced to half, and Mitsubishi's land kept growing. Well, I had heard about this in 1988, but when I was able to organize people around this, citizens decided to sue DNR and Parks because the way they were doing this secret deal, which nobody knew about until we blew their coop, so to speak, and we hired attorneys. We learned that the agencies were avoiding doing the normal process of a state Environmental Protection Act regulations. They didn't even want to deal with this. They wanted to do it after everything was ready to go, and then they would do SEPA and nobody would have a chance to say anything. It was very convoluted. So at the same time, the citizens got together and we said, well, you know, maybe we ought to do something in addition, which is run a few initiatives. One of which was, if State Parks doesn't want this land, then let the county bring it back as a county park. And the county commissioners at that time were very favorable to turning this land over to Mitsubishi. They saw dollar signs, basically. They thought all these people would come in from around the world, spend a lot of money in Clallam County, in this new city, literally a city on Miller Peninsula, and that would make us famous. The citizens saw otherwise. And so we had a number of legal actions against both the state and the county. And over a year and a half, we were in Superior Court, we were in the Appellate Court many times, and at the state Supreme Court. And by 1992, the citizens won all but one lawsuit. And that was one against the county, and it was insignificant because we had already kept the land, the parkland. We had won it in a strange way, but we won it back in August of 1992. And when we did, I called Cleve Penix, who was then the head of state parks, and said, "Oh, Cleve, can we have a lot more land out there? There's some other parcels that should be in this park." And he just went really silent. And I thought, oh, well, that's the end of that. I just poured some salt into that wound. But he called back next day and said, yeah, we'd like some of the private land that Mitsubishi bought out there. And if you support us, we'll give you anything you want. So we wanted, it grew to double 2,888 acres, basically. And the state legislature in 1993 agreed to give us all that land and pay for it, but they would not give parks money to develop it at that point. So over the years, Parks has put in some money for naming the trails, fixing the trails, getting volunteers to help them fix the 35 miles of trails, putting in signage and a parking lot, and as I said, upgrading the trails. Fast forward to 2020 or 2021, Parks begins to contact what they call stakeholders, meeting with them in person or meeting with them online, like the Jamestown-Sklallam Tribe, Miller Peninsula Community, environmentalists. Anita and I were on one of those calls, and they presented us with some visions. And by this time, you know, we all realized that we had a very special piece of land that needed to stay day use. People were discovering it, equestrians, hikers and bikers, and it was just fine the way it was. And we should respect the land and the animals and the plants that are dependent on that land. But Park showed us 3 different plans, which we'll see in a little bit. And they were horrible. And we said, well, you know, there should be another alternative here. And the map shows most of the northern part of Peninsula is state park now. I asked them to consider that we preserve what we consider is a preserve. Next slide, please, Peter. So in essence, Parks wants to, what we call Disneyfy the park, disrupt the quiet, endanger the aquifers out there. We don't know how much water there is. Cut down mature forest, and probably lose money in the process. Next slide, Peter. So we'll be looking right now at 3 different proposals by state parks. Actually, very recently, they came out with a 4th, and I'll talk about that after. One is called the Village Center, one is immersed in nature, and then there's traditional camping. Next slide, please, Peter. Okay, that is the traditional camping. There would be a welcome center, a camping for RVs, tent camps, camping, 12 cabins with the ability to have use your electronics and have maid service in a sense, sheets and all that, and roads and beach access to the trail. So look at that for a moment, and you can see where all this camping is clustered. And then next slide, please. And this is the immersed in nature, where campers would be spread out in different areas. Now, there's a lot of restrictions, and thankfully the parks did do a restriction map that we're not showing tonight, but there are wetlands all over the place, and some of them are very, very large. So there can't be camping near there. There can't be a lot of other things near there. But most of, again, the entrance, a lot of things would be condensed in one area. And then the next slide, Peter, is the village center. And this would be clustered. It would have a 100-room lodge, dining areas, concessions, still the cabins outside, RV tent camping. They talked about zip lines over the trees so people could zip over all the forest, an amphitheater, recreation center, etc. And they have now come up with another vision, and it is on their website, but they haven't gone out to the public with it yet. It's to take 73 acres of the forest and spread all their design over, I think, 343 acres or something throughout the park. So it would be a massive intrusion into this preserve, and a lot of cutting down trees. And that's the plan I believe they're going to come out with to the public later this year if they stay on schedule. Next. So they will control the park, they will own the park, but they will not build, and they might build or they might not build some of the structures they're talking about, but they want to have a private public partnership with somebody to manage the motel and the facilities and all the stuff they're going to sell and the concessions. But one of the things in this motel, if you look deeply into what they want to do, is they want to have swimming pools, indoor and outdoor swimming pools, bars, all kinds of fancy things within the hotel for people. Now, things are getting pretty costly even to go to a state park these days, and I probably couldn't afford to go to this one. So go to the next slide, please. So we are asking, how viable is it to have a 100-room lodge, 90 campsites? And it just shows that the price has gone up for entering these parks. I think this is one from the national parks, but the prices have increased and costs have increased, even for upkeep. Next slide, please. Another issue here is that there is a plan in the works for a private RV park development just south, closer to Highway 101. And as well, there are RV parks throughout Cloud County and maybe in Jefferson too. And in the past, the owners of the RV parks have been very clear: do not compete with us. Don't compete with us. This is our bread and butter. And we plan to have the RVs come here, not in your park. So that issue will come up again, I'm quite sure. Next slide. And this is a map that was put together showing where a lot of camping sites are throughout the county. So there's plenty. But we're also saying, and David Allen, who's on this call, has voiced this very strongly. Look, we have something very special here. It's an intact forest. It's a unique place. We'll get into the uniqueness a little later, but it's unique. There aren't other places like this. You do not cut these down. Go back to DNR and work with them on land that has already been cut over and set up a park there. Use your money for that, but leave this one alone. Next slide, please. We want to keep it a day use park, an educational park. There is a professor at Peninsula College that has been bringing, for over 2 decades, has been bringing his class out to study the Miller Peninsula State Park. So it's been an educational site as well as a recreational site. And then we're saying the nearby Squim Bay State Park should keep their camping. And they are complaining that they're losing some of their campsites because the soil, the winds, and the water and the sea level rise are taking some of their coastal area, and they've had to move back some of their camping sites. And that is true, but there are other places to put in more camping, and it's not in Miller Peninsula, we don't think. It has old growth, what we call legacy growth, trees that are 80 years and older that are reclaiming, going back to claiming their old growth status. It has unique trees and plant clusters, over 200 different species of plants. And the soil throughout the park, as we've learned from David Allen, who's a botanist, it varies. And it's the soil that everything above depends on. It's the soil. Hence, everything that we see that's visual to our eyesight depends on the soils and how they are treated and their nutrition. So we say keep it intact, forested, save development fees, find other places to develop more camping if it's really needed. Next slide, please. On this slide, we are in agreement with state parks. We do need to give it a new name. Miller is named after a logger, and Parks wants to change that. We want to change it. Dr. Eloise Kalin, who formed Friends of Miller Peninsula State Park and helped stop the nuclear power plant and the RV park and the off-road vehicle park, and worked with us to save this parkland in the 1990s. It would be nice to honor her and name it after her, or at least some section after Dr. Eloise Kalin. She's a very famous allergist, but a very, very famous and environmentalist as well, because she well understood the impacts of the environment on human health. She passed away in 2019 at the age of 100. Next slide, please. So, yes, climate change is here, and we're very concerned about this park. It is a part of a triangle. So you have in Sequim the Dungeness National Wildlife Refuge with native and migrating birds some miles away, and just across from the Clallam County border into Jefferson County, you have Protection Island. That is an area that is protected for migrating birds, thousands of migrating birds. And then you have Miller Peninsula, and these birds circulate all the way around. They use all these sites as well. There's some mammals, protected mammals, at the Dungeness Refuge and at Protection Island. So the aquifer is an issue for us. We're in a drought period, and it's going to get worse. What is Parks thinking? Where are they going to get the water? And the park is a carbon sink. It's just a wonderful carbon sink, and it needs to stay protected. Right now, Parks is asking Department of Ecology to give their permit to go ahead and start testing for water. There is a well out there from Mitsubishi days, and they need to go back and test it for water quality and water quantity. And then they need to look elsewhere and test elsewhere to see if there's enough water for their plans, or would they have to build a pipeline and bring in water from somewhere else. Next slide, please. It's very interesting, and that the Department of Ecology kind of agrees with us. We're in a drought, and this is the driest period since 1895. What we're seeing this year is likely a sign of things to come. It's going to get warmer, it's going to get drier, and as well, there is more residential building on Miller Peninsula on both sides of the parks and below that, and they're going to be needing water. So where are we at with water? Next slide, please. Well, let's go to the next one. Basically covered this. Yes, and what Debbie has found out is that there's only 17% of state parks are designated day use. Only 15% of those day use parks allow for equestrian activities. And this park is well used and protected by the equestrians, and they work a lot on keeping up the trails as well. Next slide, please. How do we plan for a destination development in Miller Peninsula State Park when we are looking at carbon issues and drought issues, climate issues? That's a western toad there, western red toad. Next. And just to repeat some of what we've said earlier, this is what's in the park, and we feel that we are guests in this land, that this land belongs to the plants and the animals. And when we come in, we're coming there to learn, not to destroy it. Next slide, please. So we've been busy. A lot of citizens have come together and made our views known to state parks. We've met with them. We've created petitions for people to sign. We've turned them over to state parks. We've attended their meetings and multiple times and let the parks commissioners know what we want. We've met with our county commissioners, and so far they're supporting that this could be a day use park. We've met with the governor's staff a few times, and the Clallam County Commissioner sent a letter to state parks in support of our fourth option to keep this a preserve and a day use park and an educational park. Next slide. So we've talked about the aquifers we're concerned about. If they allow camping and fires out there, campfires out there, this would be really polluting for the air and dangerous for the surrounding forest. Stayovers, day use is one thing, but a lot of traffic and staying 2 nights or longer in the park would seriously impact the park and the animals that depend on it. If you have ever walked down to the beach, it's a ravine down there, a mile and a quarter or more. And that's a night roost for crows and for eagles. They come in at night and they need that space. If you walk further down the beach, though we don't talk about it much, there are blue herons. There are families of blue herons down there. So somewhere, we don't know where, they have nests around Miller Peninsula. Next slide. So how can you help? Well, thank you for coming. That's one way we're trying to tell you about the park. We'd like you to contact commissioners and directors. Pay attention when when Parks comes out later this year with their plan. It'll be in the newspapers, it'll be in the media, but look for it, and we'll certainly reach out to everybody we know to tell them to start to listen to parks and to make their own views known. Contact our county commissioners, let them know you're in support of protecting the land as is. Visit the park and love it, and volunteer with us.